Damn it. Okay, let's see. Let's go back over. Okay. Hey, Charles. How you doing? I don't know. It's suddenly, it updated, Zoom updated, and it required a password, 781-978. I don't know what the hell happened. I tried to undo it, but it says our account is requires it. I don't know, but whatever. Let me see here. Maybe I can contact these other guys. Sort of everything happens at the last minute here. 781.
Is there a settings that
Well, yeah, I'm gonna have to check that later. But I mean, I checked the settings, and where you could uncheck it, it was grayed out.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually saw something today about Zoom taking extra security measures because of so many people using it now. So that might be part of it, I guess.
Yes, I mean, my wife is actually doing one right now, and she says every once in a while they get trolls, and they put pictures.
Yeah, that's bound to happen.
They put porn pictures up on their meetings, so they have to shut it down.
Right.
But, okay, here, Miles finally figured it out. Okay. All right. Are you there, Miles? I don't know. I admitted him, but yeah, okay, Miles is there. Okay, well, it was a last minute, when I did the Zoom update, they require a password now because of the fact that you should have bought stock in Zoom before before coronavirus hit. So, hey, Tim, they just updated Zoom and now are requiring passwords. Charles was saying he read that. That was before we should have bought stock in the company, with with all the people using it all the time now. So anyway, we'll see. Hopefully, I sent out a couple emails so that people would. I didn't know about it till 2 seconds ago, so it's my surprise to me as well, as they say. Okay. All right. I think we're ready. Okay. So anyway, we'll just head into this. I think this is going to be this is really going to kick everybody's butt. I mean, if you really want to get into this, I mean, it's.
Craig, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Tim. My video isn't working, but I'm here.
Okay, that's great. That's fine. I don't know. Zoom required an update before I could use it, and then after, it required a password, and it's grayed out, and it won't let me ungrade it or ungrade.
Yeah.
It. Yeah. And Charles was saying, go ahead.
It's a good thing to know. So we won't upgrade.
Yes, I shouldn't have upgraded. I don't know why I did, but anyway, I mean, I thought there'd be something new, but it was just something more onerous. Well, anyway, we'll go into the this very exciting theory of ally work, and I mean this is where it gets real. I think. I mean this is Jeffery Raff, has had 40 years of doing this, and he actually was doing it, having some visions, shamanic type visions, before he went to the Young Institute, in the early 70s, and was, he was the student of von Franz, and, I've met him, and, he's had all kinds. If you read his books, I mean, he's just has had incredible experiences. And, he has, Jung said that he thought there was, in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections at the end, he says he thought there were realms of reality that we had not yet accessed, and this is what, Jeffrey Raff calls the psychoid world, which is a world where beings exist which are neither in the psyche or in the real world. So, but they're living beings. But I don't know why that's a distinction, but I don't know if it's relevant either. But, he had beings come up to him and thump him in the chest. And he says you could, and he says there's a spectrum of the visionary world, the imaginal world. This is the world, the imaginal space of dreams. Okay, but it's also can be accessible while we're awake. And the way it's accessed, is through learning to perceive the imaginal world, and that's what we're going to really go through. I mean, he says this book's a very practical book. It's not, doesn't have a lot of theory in it. It just goes through kind of the three conjunctios. I mean, it basically goes through the one where you establish imaginal presence, with these beings, but it's not permanent. And then the second conjunctio is where you've established the connection and it's permanent. And this partner that you have, this divine being, is there all the time. And then the third conjunctio is where you and the partner, who he calls the ally, actually are working together with some work that affects both worlds, and this is slightly different than what you will read in Jung's accounts of alchemy, but it's more from what Jeffery Raff has actually experienced, and so he really didn't think that he does speak. It's slightly different than Jung, but it's based on his own experiences and not his theories. Okay. But anyway, the just going through the theory of ally work, and jump in at any time, is one thing too is interesting at the beginning, is what really is the nature of reality. I mean, this was what Jung said about in the Red Book. I stand above my brain from which I grew. I have become hard and that cannot be undone again. No more do I flow back. The idea here is that consciousness is not biochemistry. There is an aspect of it that is, and this is why people who have had near-death experiences can read newspapers. They're in a coma and they can read newspapers and they know everybody that was in the room. I mean, and yet, they were in a coma. And I did. When my mother died, my sister, or her sister, was a real artist, and she would always do a meditation before she started her artwork, and she looks up and she sees my mother standing there barefoot. My mother was a Iowa farm girl, and she'd get one pair of shoes a year. They'd kill a hog, and dress the hog, and then the shoe salesman would give them some shoes in exchange, kind of like a barter, and they would only wear them in the winter. So she got very tough feet. But anyway, my aunt sees my mother standing there, and she's so startled that my mother disappears. So then she says, well, I'm going to do this again. This time I'm not going to be startled. So she looks down and she looks up and she sees my mother again. Well, my aunt Chris had spent, my mother died on Christmas Day, and my Aunt Chris spent all Christmas Eve and Christmas morning with her. And, but she never came out of a coma. But anyway, my mother tells her, thank you, and my Uncle Karl, for being there all this time, in my last few minutes. But anyway, I mean, this is sort of this idea that our consciousness, even though you can pick up things by putting, little things on you, the actual contents of the conscious are not, biochemical. And, it's also, where in the hell did we come from? And this deal of negentropy is this improbable state of order. I mean, how from an equilibrium on a lifeless rock did the peacock come forth? How did the consciousness come forth? It's just an issue. So this, now we're with that kind of a background of, and the incredible synchronicity of consciousness and body. You can say, well, it's all organic chemistry, Well, there's plenty of evidence it isn't. I mean, I just cited some. It's funny. I tell my wife sometimes these incredible things that have happened to us and happened to all of you, and yet we just totally discount them. As I mean, they're just, they're just random. They're not. There's not any underlying reality behind them. But anyway, so now we're going to talk about the imaginal world. And, he starts out with these, imagination is the truth of our souls, the imaginal world. Now, the imaginal world is the world is a real world, and has nothing to do with fantasy. It has to do with the word comes from magnify, and it means to expand, and it means to expand consciousness. Now, the idea is that the ego, which separated from nature and from the body, is now an appropriate vehicle for the source that out of which life emanated, and which wants to itself incarnate in time and space with and have a dialogue with some being that is capable of having a dialogue with. Up until the appearance of the non-knuckle walking hominids, there really wasn't any being with grammar, with words, with differentiated thinking. And this is, Jung says consciousness came into being really from the four functions differentiating, where in other beings can think, other beings can feel, other beings have intuition, and they also have sensation. And yet those aren't differentiated. They all work as one unit, where if you are a thinking function person, it's sort of like the division of labor when after the hunter-gatherers moved into settled settlements, and they started to develop agriculture and animal husbandry, and then moved into making tools and metals and stuff. There are certain people that were good at doing this and certain people good at doing that, and so there was this differentiation which increased consciousness and magnified it, expanded it. Well, the whole idea is you create this very powerful vessel of it, the incarnation, and then it realizes that it needs to return. So anyway, so now we're just going to talk about the return. This is the return of the ego to actually, to actually accomplish the goal that it's supposed to be accomplishing. And let's see, 7. Okay, I'm just saying here. All right, Gary's having problems here. I'm just going to tell him password is okay. 781798, and then I'm going to go like this. Paste. There we go. This is that's the password. This is the password. I'm so sorry about this. I mean, this is not my doing. It was a.
The reason why you're having to do the password.
Yes.
Zoom is being bombed, so to speak, by trolls.
Yes, and it's actually happening to my wife, because she's doing all these Zoom meetings, and they're in a meeting, and it's basically a meeting of women in recovery, and suddenly all these porn pictures start showing up. I mean, somebody who you know, can see his hack Zoom and can see the what's happening, you know, is
And I think they're moving
crashing
in
these
mobs.
meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I think they're like a mob, and here's the Zoom meeting we can crash. Because I was in a meeting, and all of a sudden there was just like there was maybe 5 to 10 people in this meeting, and then all of a sudden there's like 30 people in this meeting, and they'll take over the whole meeting. They'll take over the screen sharing, and it's just terrible. And you pretty well have to close down the meeting. So this is
well, that's what they had to do, you know.
Yeah.
And they had to just close down the meeting. I hope Gary can find us. Damn it. Well, anyway, so you know, and the other thing, you know, Marie-Louise von Franz, I remember dreams are the imaginal space. So, and she says the most real thing that we have are our dreams, because there's absolutely no artifice in them, you know, and they speak, you know, the truth, you know. And anyway, this all artifice is burned away. And then he starts talking about who is the ally. Well, it's the twin of my soul. Now, that's what he calls it. Okay, so I think he's a little confusing about what soul is and what ally is, but actually the ally is the unique face of God in each one of us. You know, it's unique to each individual, yet it is latent. It is unconscious within us. Now the soul is the mediator, and the soul, you know, he says this later. The soul kind of creates the venue. Now, I actually discovered this even before I read the book. In my active imaginations, it somehow became known to me, and I don't know how, that the soul, or the gendered aspect of the imaginal world that we're also born with. So we're born with this unique face of God, which was called the ally, and we're also born with the soul, which is a gendered aspect, because we occupy one gender, and we in our true being, we're not one gender. We are both genders. So the other half of us that is not, that makes us, unites the genders, is the unconscious, or the living presence in the outside of time and space, which is still us, but it's our feminine half. You know, it's always the opposite. So if you're an introverted intuitive, you know, which I am, then my my soul is going to be a extroverted sensate. And also, since I'm the male, it's going to be a female. You know.
Could I just share something?
Yeah.
So when you started out, you said that you and a partner are to work together on something that will affect, I don't know if you said the world, but let's say that you did.
Yeah.
So I immediately it was like, boom. That really made an impact on me, because I thought of this gentleman who I was going to connect with to see if we could collaborate on something. And the day that we agreed to meet for coffee was the last day I ever saw him, because he got cancer and he died.
Mm-hmm.
And it hit me that, well, yeah, I'm still his ally, or he's still my ally. And I would say he does represent the face of God to me. So anyway, just those are some thoughts.
Well, yeah, and that is, we've got to go through you know, a lot of work, before we get to that stage. You know, I mean, it's he'll go into that in just a bit of what, you know, basically ally. Yeah.
I just wanted to throw a thought in there. I don't know, just the idea of having an ally, kind of in order to do work that affects both worlds. I don't know, just made me think there's no way the ego could do it on its own.
No.
There has to be some sort of like ally or personal connection to the other world that is like personified in some sort of figure, because there, I don't know, there has to be a way to like relate to the other world.
Relationship and attention and intention. This is the whole thing. Is it's giving attention to the inner world, and you make it alive. You know, whatever you give attention to, and this is something that you know, Jeffery Raff says to be careful with. Whatever you give intention to is going to grow in power. You know, this was something Jung said, because he understood it too. If you look at a picture of God long enough, he nods, and he's not kidding. Okay. But the idea here, you know, for instance, you know, in this meeting that I was in with Jeffery Raff, it was in Asheville, North Carolina. He was going through the rules of active imagination, and don't ever have active imaginations with either real or dead live beings. And I asked him, well, why not dead beings? And well, first of all, he believes in black magic. He says if you give your attention, if you're doing active imaginations on living persons, he says you are impacting them in ways you don't understand. You know, and this was actually Michael Harner, you know, who's this big shamanic expert, you know, said that, you know, he was talking about the power in the shamanic world of crystals, of quartz crystal, you know, and he was, and at the end he says, you know, they're kind of a pillar with a point on it, you know, and he says, and by the way, don't ever point it at anybody. But then as far as the departed, why you shouldn't do an active imagination with the departed. And I said, well, why would that make a difference? He says, because you are empowering death in your own self, in your consciousness, you know, so don't do it. I mean, you're actually are giving.
I'll take a position to counter that though, because it also occurred to me that this gentleman whose name is Standing Stone, mm-hmm. He's not actually dead.
Mm-hmm.
But
well,
he's
I mean,
here in this world.
Well, and he did make an exception if you are have some lingering issue. Now you remember Anna Marjula had a lingering issue with her father, but she didn't talk to her father about it. She talked to Great Mother about it. She talked to the shadow about it, you know, and the shadow told her what she felt while her father was doing some of these things, you know. But anyway, it's just that whatever you give your attention to grows in power.
Yeah, so, I just find that really interesting, because a lot of the times that I've done what I guess I would call active imagination, I just meditate and kind of find myself sitting down with von Franz and basically going through analysis with her. Mm-hmm. And it's really helpful. She always has a lot of wisdom to tell me from my experiences.
It could be that you're talking to the real Marie-Lise von Franz, but it could also be she is. I mean, people often dream about Jung. You know, I've had 3 or 4, and I'm always trying to look into his eyes. I want to look into his eyes, and he won't ever look into my eyes, But anyway, it could be that it's the wise old woman. I had a dream about Marie Louise von Franz too, and she goes down into the dark depths and redeems people who are trapped down there. So in that case, it was the wise old woman. She just appears as the wise old woman. So you're not really possibly channeling the individual, von Franz. You're channeling. She has assumed the identity of the archetype. Now, that's another thing, that my anima, I call her Joanne. Well, this is a woman that I knew when I was a little kid, and who I betrayed, this girl who I really betrayed. And it was very necessary for me to make amends with her. And yet my soul has her face. So when, I separated from my soul, at the same time I betrayed the living Joanne. So, I don't know, that's a little bit weird, but it seems to be what evolved. So I don't know what to do about it. But anyway, let's see. Well, anyway, I'm just sorry about Gary. Poor Gary, it's trapped outside. When this first started, this coronavirus, our grandson got locked out of school in a rainstorm because this was before they did the social distancing, and so he's standing outside in a rainstorm. The doors are locked. So I kind of have this image. So anyway, so we're talking about the
Try to
ally.
let him in while you're talking. I'll see if I can send him anything that might help.
Yeah, well, I just sent the email with the user ID is the same one as the link that we have, and the password is 781798. And I don't know. It's kind of well, if it ain't one thing, it's another. Well, anyway, Raff says, Sophia is a great goddess in the other realm, but in this realm, in alchemy anyway, she's held bondage. She needs to be rescued. And he says, our imaginal world is also imprisoned. And he says that that when we actually first meet this unique face of God within us, its first question is, where have you been? I've been waiting for you. And he says that usually, as far as religion, we just read sacred text, but never as symbols, never as dreams like we did last night, but as literal truth. By the way, both you and Charles' dream, Tim, have haunted me. I thought they were both very beautiful, and I've been thinking about them, all morning.
Oh, good. I wrote for probably an hour about that dream this morning.
Yeah,
too.
It's very beautiful, and I think it's gonna come up a little bit later, about the turtles are the prima materia, and the tortoises. But anyway, I mean, that was what I was kind of linking them with. So, anyway, the life of imagination has been impoverished because we don't have one, because we're just reading what were at one time original experiential material. The sacred texts were at one time original experiential material of someone or some community, but that evolved somehow. However myths evolve, I don't know. It's a great mystery. But they were experiential. Now they are dead and literal truths, not dreams that I think Joseph Campbell did that. He took these myths and read them as dreams, and that's the way you should. So anyway, but he says the imaginal world, the well is not gone dry. We can drink from this well deeply and refresh our souls in a remarkable way. but we don't know how. And then he starts talking about kind of defining who the ally is, and it's the uniqueness. He starts out is, what is the nature of the ally? Well, one thing that a lot of esoteric traditions, particularly Sufism and alchemy, were very intrigued by the uniqueness of each human being. And they thought it was the most significant aspect of our existence, is how each individual is totally unique. I mean, like it's, what is it? The whole universe in a grain of sand, this is, there's an aspect that is both universal and unique, which they thought was extremely mysterious, extremely important. And so they said that truth was multifaceted, and then this was their statement: the only universal truth is that all revelation is unique, and so you're born with the Redeemer. You're born with him. He's not outside you, and yet he's unconscious and he's latent until you learn how to perceive imaginal spaces. And that was the whole deal in alchemy, is that you are not redeemed by an outside redeemer. You redeem the divine that is trapped and imprisoned within you, just like Sophia is, just like the imaginal world is, and just like your ally is, and your soul. They're all imprisoned until you start to lend them the attention of ego consciousness. So there's one face for each individual, one divine face. Everyone has a different face within them, a different divine face. And it's said that the universe is vast in its bestowal, but only the Lord of the individual exists. No one universal Lord. And God grows with us. Is the being in the soul of each individual, and it's a living being. It's not and he's deeply loving, and comes, and that he says the term comes, of course, from shamanism. Is
I just share something quickly. So what you just read about everything is unique to each individual, it reminds me of this, and maybe I've shared this already, but I'll share it again. This gentleman who is an economics professor, and he's talking about the economic theory of Karl Marx. And there's a connection between Karl Marx and Hegel, the great German philosopher Hegel. And I'm not going to try to explain that because I don't think I could. But anyway, the one thing that Hegel said that this professor of economics shared, and it was like, oh, wow, it was like mic drop for me, just boom. He said Hegel claimed that if you add up all your experiences, good and bad, all your learning, all your relationships, good and bad, and you kind of take the 60,000-foot view of it all, it is telling you, I guess your truth, because, we're not going to necessarily say any one truth is the truth, but at least your truth can be seen if you can encompass the entirety of it. And that's very much Jung's definition of God. And it's very much what you just read about how everybody's got this unique slice of the pleroma.
Yeah, I mean, it's that is once it's a multifaceted. So everyone is a separate gem, a separate facet of maybe one gem, and in Buddhism, it's called the network of gems. I mean, it is that each individual is a gem if they recognize that there is the other. You're not the master in your own house. There is a divine living being within you that you need to be partner with. You don't worship it. You're not its devotee. You are in partnership with it. And he says that it's always unique to the specific individual. You're born with it. It awaits you. It never seeks another. It's paired with only one human, so it has to wait until you seek it. And if it is unsought, it remains alone and unfulfilled. Don't look on me because I'm black and uncomely. I live in the mire. And this has done this to me. I mean, this is what the inner being says. And whoever who comes to me, I will give into their hands the morning star. I mean, this is the idea of this living being within you that needs to have the unconscious lend it its attention. And they said the sages, this is from alchemy, sages initiated in the things the sensory faculties don't perceive, knew that there was in the spiritual realm one who through his existence watched over him with especial solicitude and tenderness, and led them to knowledge, protected them, guided them, defended them, comforted them, and were their friend, defender. And so the idea of linking with this imaginal world, or becoming skilled in perceiving this, is you must meet the ally and you must differentiate it. You're loving and accepting companion. And one woman who Raff was working with, who first met this being, said it was as if she had been seen for the first time. Up until then, she'd been invisible. Anyway, when you do meet it, and he says you're welcomed as a long lost friend, and it greets you with such joy and love. It's hard to mistake it for anything else. No other being in the unconscious treats us this way. And it requires one thing, and that's relationship. And that's what differentiates it from all other inner beings. The one thing it asks from us is relationship. And the relationship it craves is one between equals. It seeks a partner, not a worshiper. And the more developed we become, the more it can manifest. So it's somewhat. This is what he's going to get into later. Is perception and mirroring. That the seeing and the seen change each other.
Is this idea at all related to the concept or idea of the alchemical wedding, or is that?
Oh, exactly. All of this, everything in here is, Jeffery Raff, among other things, is probably took alchemy as seriously as anybody did, and so he really links it. This kind of is stripped of its alchemical aspects, but his first book, which is called Alchemical Active Imagination, and also the one that's called The Wedding of Sophia, which goes through what is it called, the chemical wedding of Christian Rosencreutz, You know,
Right.
it is the most beautiful little thing. I mean, it's worth reading it, and it's just by itself. And then he also does a little bit on Gerhard Dorn's active imagination of body, soul, and spirit walking to the house of wisdom together. You know, and spirit and body notices as they're on the journey that suddenly there's only one person with him, not two, and he finds that soul and spirit united. So that's the first conjunctio. So now it's just body and soul spirit walking along, and they go and you know, Jeffrey Raff says the only one that speaks honestly in the whole dialogue is body. You know, I mean, because it's so practical. You know, and it doesn't ever lie. You know, because it's nature. You know, where spirit and soul tend to, especially when they first unite, are very inflated, and they tend to have a very high opinion of themselves, and sort of denigrating the body, but the body doesn't mind, you know. But anyway, that's in the Wedding of Sophia, and then this is his book on really just putting these. You know, he kind of strips all the hocus pocus out of it a little bit. It sounds real hocus pocus, but when we're going through this, but it's actually totally experiential, you know, as he's talking. I mean, this is stuff he's experienced himself. So anyway, the
Craig,
yes.
can I just interrupt for, sorry to interrupt the flow, but
no problem.
Technical questions. I just noticed, because I was going over to YouTube to see if Gary's hanging out over there,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a posting that came up and it said your YouTube has been closed down for violating YouTube terms of service.
Oh, all right.
And I know that's happening. I don't know what YouTube's doing, but I was in
well,
another
it should
one
be live
yesterday.
streaming again. It says it is. Do you
Oh,
see
is it?
Do you see it live streaming now?
I'll go back and check. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that we have access to the recording, because there's so much in these discussions that I really benefit from being able to listen to them again.
Yes.
Because certain stuff goes by. Anyway, and then I guess is Gary possibly holding up his hand anywhere in
I
your
don't
system on
see
your end?
him. No, I don't
Okay.
see him. I'm sitting here looking because I feel horrible.
Okay.
I think it
Thank
is
you.
on.
Sorry for the interruption.
It is streaming. I was
Okay.
able to get on it earlier.
Yeah, and I will. I'm actually. This meeting is being recorded, so if the other one's incomplete, we can post it. You know. But anyway, what this book's going to do is going to really go through just how you do active imagination, and again, he's just trying to tell you why we would do it. Why would we do active imagination? And it's really, this is wholeness. This is individuation. If you don't do it, you're not achieving wholeness, which means that you have a foot in both worlds. You know, I mean, it's not being well balanced. Hey, I'm real well balanced, you know. I mean, which is, you know, what personalistic psychologies are trying to do. You know, I mean, they're trying to be a very well balanced person, find out what things are triggers, and, you know, try to make them not triggers. You know, well, you know, in this, the idea is to to awaken the divine within you. And you know, sometimes you maybe not even call it the divine, but you know, it's a link to the core of meaning in the universe. I mean, this is your link to the core of meaning in the universe. You know, and so anyway, the idea is when we first start this, our egos are very weak. They're not able to really get into the imaginal realms because we are so unable to do it. I mean, because it's imagination is the faculty that can perceive imaginal reality. It actually perceives what's happening in the imaginal world, and this is basically being able to to dreams already exist in this space that we need to access, which is the imaginal realm, which is where we can meet this divine being, and but we have to. What he's trying to do is to show us how we can create the ability to be permeable and to be able to access that, so and as we gain in the ability to perceive the inner beings through active imagination, they become more able to incarnate in our world. So it is this mirroring of the seeing changes the scene, and the scene changes the seer. So it's a mutual aspect of a mutual process. And what the allies also is related to the philosopher's stone. It is it by giving birth to the ally, you also give birth to transformation and incarnation. It is the through the he just goes into the psychoid world a little bit. It's the psychoid world. We went through that, but I don't really think you need to know what the psychoid world is. But he's saying that these beings, his opinion is they don't exist in psyche, but he says the first ones we encounter are psyche, but eventually you can encounter your individual face of God, and it exists really outside of your own psyche. I don't know what that means, but I guess it would mean that it's your angel. It would be more of an angelic figure, that you're born guardian angel, and it would also be a neutral figure. It's not good. It's got its nature. So it's not just light, and so imaginal beings are consciousness, are conscious but are not physical beings, and they exist in the imaginal realm. So they are living centers of awareness that are not us, that exist in the imaginal realm, if we can only differentiate them out of that by dialogue. And he says too that imagination, the imaginal world, is belongs to the soul. Okay, and this is the thing I had before I even read this book. The soul, this is the other half of us that's not the divine, and yet it has a very intimate friend whom with it confides in always, and that is the self, or this ally, the unique face of God. She confides it in always. So it's kind of sets the venue. I mean, this is a little bit of the technical definitions of this, but what we really want to get into eventually is just doing the active imaginations. So the soul embodies meaning by thinking and understanding in the images that come up through the unconscious. I don't know. That's a little hard to understand. Anyway, so then we go to imagination is a special capacity to perceive and experience imaginal realities. It doesn't have anything to do with being creative. It means that you are permeable and possess skill in perceiving the imaginal realities, okay, which they are conscious, they exist, they're alive, they're real. And that was what Jung said no one ever understood from him or from Jeffery Raff or from alchemists, is they believed that this consciousness within the imaginal realm is alive, and that's, one thing. And, like I say, I've still told other people, if you don't believe that, try working with the I Ching for a while. I mean, that's a really good introduction to the imaginal realms. If you can, I think as we go through some dream interpretation, sometimes the messages of the I Ching become a little more understandable because they sound a little bit like the Oracle of Delphi telling a general goes there, he's about ready to go into battle, and he goes to the Oracle and asks her, what will happen today? And she says, a great army will be defeated. But she doesn't say whose, and it was actually his, and that's kind of what it sounds like. It just, it's not, it's a little unclear, but I think to me it's become very clear, and I'm absolutely, well, what's amazing to me about it, when I'm in great duress and I throw an I Ching, I always get either 6 solid lines or 6 open lines. Now, what are the odds of that? I mean, it's just, I just get those more than you would think chance would allow, and this is synchronicity, Do you believe in synchronicity? I mean, this is the fact that the imaginal realm is possesses in a very mysterious way past, present, and future. And it's also outside of space. And yet it also is the wisdom that created the peacock, this emanating force that allowed the peacock to come into existence. So it's this unbelievable, rich, powerful, which longs for the light, it longs to be incarnate. And Jung says that as far as he's considered, the whole history of life on Earth has been the story of the progressive incarnation of the deity, a deity, but I think there's multiple deities, and each one of us has our own deity, which, it gives you a little bit of dignity, I think, if true, so,
yeah, the deity is, as you said, this gem that we are all, you said, facets of, I think. Would you?
Yes. Okay. We got Stuart's here. Well, hi, Stuart. Oh, wait, he left. Oh, maybe he's there. Oh, anyway, there. Hi, Stuart. How are you doing? Yeah. Here, let me unmute you. Let's see here. There you go. Can you speak now?
Yeah, thanks for letting me in, Craig. Listen, don't disturb. I got my times wrong, so.
Okay, well, it's just nice to see your smiling face. Okay. Well, anyway, we're just going at it. I mean, we got sort of blindsided by Zoom because they put a password on everybody, you know, and I hadn't publicized it yet. So anyway, we're just still talking about this, the book that is going to teach us how to do active imagination, you know, how to you know, access the imaginal realm, lend it our attention and our consciousness, and through doing that, we make this this being that was born just for us, this unique face of God, and us are now going to be able to exchange information and grow with each other, you know, through the images that come up. So, I mean, and the idea is this is what we were born for, you know, especially in the second half of life after we've raised all our children or you know, God. So anyway, keeping talking about the imaginal realm, it's you know, it's a perception, the perception of a higher reality, you know, and it is to develop imagination is to cultivate a capacity to see and relate to imaginal beings, you know, and it's learning to perceive imaginal spaces while awake, and a dream is an imaginal space, and you have access to imaginal spaces in your dreams, but the idea here is the only way that you can have a dialogue with the unique face of the divine within you is to lend it your attention while you are in dialogue with it after you have quieted the ego, you know. And you know, I can just kind of describe quickly how I do it. You know, I've probably done this, but you know, basically I spend about 30 minutes just going over my dreams and trying to organize them a little bit, because this is what this is my raw material to talk with the divine, or you know, the to talk with the in my active imagination. This gives me some things to ask questions about, you know, which is the dream images, and it's very, very powerful. So then after 30 minutes, then I spend 15 minutes of meditation. Okay. Now, the meditation though is I'm developing it into a visionary active imagination. And now I'm no better than anybody else here in doing visionary active imaginations. You have to train yourself, just like I mean, the whole idea is what they're saying is that you need to develop the perceiving facility that is going to allow this imaginal reality and the consciousness that exists in the imaginal reality to be accessible to your awareness. It takes some training. So,
Craig,
yes.
Why is it you put a time limit on these things?
I don't, because, you know, I got a day job. I do it first thing in the morning, you know, so I mean, it's a good time to do it too, because you're, you know, you're a little bit, you know, morning wisdom is better than evening wisdom, you know, so in the morning, I think sometimes you're more accessible to this world. I think night, for me, I fall asleep too much at night, but I don't know, that might not be true of everybody.
So it's not a matter of trying to force your unconscious to concentrate on that little period, because that's another technique that I sometimes use when I'm like trying to come up with an idea on a deadline. I will make an appointment with my muse and say, okay, 2:00 tomorrow, I'm going to meet with you and we're going to figure this out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of do that, but you know, not really. Everything, as far as I'm concerned, is completely open. I have no idea what's going to happen. but so after I've kind of sat down, written my dreams down and tried to do a little organizing of them, on what each, there may be 8 to 10 aspects in a dream that I just try to make, do an outline of what happened, and what are questions I might have. Not questions, but I'm just listing them. I'll ask questions about them. But then I do like 15 minutes of meditation, and that is to quiet the ego. I mean, because you're not going to be accessible. You can't access these worlds with a very harsh light. Okay. But anyway, so I do the active imagination or meditation. And, I usually try to imagine going somewhere, and it's been several iterations. I've been doing this for about 2.5 years since I stopped doing analysis. And the current iteration is that I come to a top of a hill. I see the forest in the valley. Then I go descend into it. I see the gate guardian, who is the woman who tends woodpeckers. The one who these are the spiritual beings of rooted things. And there is a flowing river between, which I've kind of am linking with. It's the unconscious, but I'm linking it with Hermes, Lord Hermes, because it's moving. It's not a still. If it was still, I think it would be more feminine. And then on the other side, in the alpine meadow, I meet the Great Mother with the lunar disc behind her. And also, I try to talk to the anima. That's basically the agenda for each meditation. But you never know what's going to happen. It always is, like I said the other day when I did this, I was up. I just suddenly found myself, and this is what he calls the felt sense. I just found myself airborne, and I could not come down to the ground. And it was a little bit of a, what is happening here? And the only thing I could do is hold out my hand, and the anima took it, and then I gradually, slowly descended. So what I think that was saying is that the only way that you can be grounded is through the help of the feminine, through the help of Eros. You are an air being. You're all logos. So if you want to participate in this realm, you're not going to be able to do it alone, either with ego or with logos. You're going to have the feminine accompany you on everything you do. And now one thing I did too, as someone who's not very powerful at the imagination, is, since nothing was really I would hear voices saying, like, welcome to our world tortured with cruelty, or torn with cruelty. In other words, it's ignored. The ego ignores it. You hear voices like that, and but to add to its power, and actually to lend awareness. When I'm standing at the top of the ridge, I imagine that I'm the forest and the valley, and I look and I try to see myself standing at the top of the ridge, and then if I am the forest in the valley, what am I going to say to this being at the ridge waiting to descend? And then when I'm going down into the river, I'm the trees that surround in the dappled sunlight with the pine needles smells, and I see myself walking through the trees. What do the trees have to say? See, this is the idea of getting these beings to start a dialogue that's non-written. Then I go down to the river, and I'm the woodpecker, and I'm the woodpecker. It's an ivory-billed woodpecker, and it's going up the thing, and it's looking at me, it just looking at me, you know, and what does it say? And then what is the old woman who lives in the log and tends these, what does she say? What does the river say? What does the water, when you immerse yourself to go across, say? What does the other side of the river say? What is the woman who sits in the alpine meadow with the lunar disk behind? She looks at you, and I try to be inside of her, and I try to see me standing there. What does she say? So anyway, that's what I do. And then after that, I do the 30 minutes of just a dialogue. And often the dialogue is going to be, why was I suspended up in the air? You know, what happened? You know, what was, like one time I come to the river and there's nothing there but dry leaves, you know, and the river's gone, you know, so then we talk about what happened to the river, you know. And
so you've probably said this already in other words, but essentially, could we say that it's a matter of having the ego, not so much as get out of the way, but to be an ally to the anima, to the soul, to accomplish what you're talking about?
I think in the beginning, for beginners like us, the thing is for the ego to lose its critical function, to be permeable to the unconscious.
I would almost say that, like, yeah, the ego has to be like pacified in a way.
Yes,
I would say
it has to still. You want to have these confrontations. You want to have these question and answer things, but you need. In other words, if you're going to do the automatic writing, you need the other side to be not. You don't want it to be that you're. You know, people say, "Well, I just made all this up." You know, well, Barbara Hanna says if you do this long enough, you're going to find out. No, there's no way you made this up. It's just too. You know, it's just. It is something that is a voice. It is a voice and a wisdom that's you have no access to. You know, and it also, as you go through, Jeffrey Raff says if you do it long enough, you're going to recognize who is speaking, even regardless of what form it says. But you know, this is.
I'm remembering. I think it was Robert Johnson's book on the inner work.
Yeah, that's going to be our next work if everybody's agreeable after this one.
I think it's in there that he tells the story about a guy who came for therapy with him, and he suggested this active imagination exercise, and the guy was really reluctant, and finally he came back with some writing he'd done, and Robert Johnson read it and was impressed by it, and the client says, "Haha, I fooled you. I just went home and wrote a bunch of stuff out of my head." And Johnson said, "Exactly. You did it exactly right."
Well, yeah, and there was somebody that was trying to fool Jung one time, and just was making up dreams, and you know, they were going on like 6 months doing this, and then finally, you know, the guy felt guilty and told Jung these weren't his real dreams. He just made them up. He says, I knew that the first day, you know, and this guy, that was his sort of his catharsis, you know, that melded, you know, the hard-hearted, you know, aspect of him, you know. Marie-Louise von Frenz said about one of the Jungians that there's a lot of hell after Jung died. And there's this one guy named C.A. Meyer who Jung had a break with before he died. But he kind of just seemed to like he was trashing the Jung Institute. And so, you know, von Franz left it. And her question of him was, where is the anima? You know, there's no anima. but and, you know, and Robert Johnson would you know, he had a Benedictine monk that he would do uh, you know, he's doing analysis with, and this guy was very cerebral, and he you know, he, also his anima was very much lacking, and he always and this is one of the wonderful things about Robert Johnson, and we'll do inner work after he's done, is he always wants you to do to not just do this, but then do a ritual. I mean, the whole idea is to make this concrete and real in the outer world. So you have to do some ritual of things. That is, what is a ritual? You know, it's actually a ceremony that you're going to do of thanks to whom? It would be to, you know, to the dream maker and to the universe, really. But anyway, so at the end of this dream, this Benedictine friar or whatever he was says, "What do you want me to do now?" You know, he's just like dreading it. He says, "Go look at the bark of 10 trees." And the guy just groaned. "What? You want me to go look at the bark of 10 trees?" You know. So he goes out and looks at the bark of 10 trees and comes back to the next thing. It was the secret that, you know, burst the dam. It was the what lifted the curse and the enchantment that was over this guy. He couldn't stop talking about tree bark. He says, "Did you know how many kinds of tree bark there are?" You know, and he's going through all the different tree barks. See, this was his first relationship with the feminine, you know, in the rooted world. You know, one thing. Here's what the Great Mother says to me. You know, this was just a couple days ago. She says, and I read a little of this last night. She says, "You can see that the change that is asked of you is profoundly deep, profoundly radical, and starkly different. The deep figures of the depth are scornful of your way of being, which is falsified and artificial. There is nothing in it that is strong enough for the next leg of your rebirth and your renewal. You, the forces of rebirth and renewal are diseased and flesh-eating in you." This was these puppies that were coming to me, the instincts, and they're got holes in them. You know, there's just big holes of air in them, and and by the overvaluing of the ego and the inadequate, how inadequate the primacy of the conscious attitude is, and which is so resistant to this work. That's what she told me. So there was a lot of questions after that, and I don't have the answers to them yet. But go ahead.
Yeah, Craig, just on that, I think it's interesting, like active imagination, a great way of working with dreams, because you can just bring all the characters together in, you know, call them back into the one space, and in a very impromptu way, work with the dream on the inside.
Well, that's
develop and evolve, and then the energy for the ritual, the by working with the dream in a conscious way, it's going to release energy into your system, into the waking system that you are, and then you will be inspired. There's a natural inspiration to go out and participate in a ritual that's not really of your making, because the aliveness that comes, the luminosity that comes out of the symbols that you interact with, goes a long way in creating its own ritual. It inspires you into its own ritual. So the ritual, in a way, doesn't have to be a conscious ritual. Oh, I'm going to go out and do this. It's like participate, just co-create it. Allow the ritual to create itself with your participation. And then the person who's involved in all of that, no matter whether they're very conscious within the process or quite unconscious within the process, they will benefit equally. Like what you're describing, Craig, is quite a conscious experience, where it's more like a shamanic journey, where there's a conscious dialogue going on with all the figures, all of the symbols. I've used this technique with clients for years where they're not conscious and they don't have that access available to them. They might be very ordinary people who are just sort of beginning their journeys, and they go out and they participate quite unconsciously in a ritual, maybe drawing or write a poem or something like this afterwards, and they get enormous benefit from having participated in the active imagination, entering into that space, living through that numinosity, with that numinosity, in the environment of that numinosity. And they don't actively know what the Great Mother, the anima, shadow figures, they don't know the dynamics of the dream, but they still benefit enormously from having gone there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, and you know what I think it is, Stuart, is magic. You're creating.
Excuse me, Stuart. I'm just wondering, are you a Jungian analyst?
No, well, I'm not a Jungian analyst. I did a 3-year counseling and psychotherapy course in Jung, and then I went off and I did the 3-year counseling course in Gestalt. So I worked through Gestalt mainly all my life. But I've had that base of Jung, and Jung has helped me to, I suppose, open up my own psyche in a way that I could understand it. It was living, first time I heard it, it jumped out at me as, yeah, this is real stuff. This is just so accurate in terms of.
And I'd like to thank you for what you just said. I wrote that down because it was like, whoa, it's very powerful.
Well, Stuart, it's just the tip of an experiential life that you've lived, which is absolutely beautiful. And I'm just saying that you're just the what you were saying comes from the heart. I mean, it comes from actual lived experience. And and this is very true. I mean, a lot of the things, the fact that I can't descend and the fact that she's telling me all this is exactly what you're describing. Is I am making this too difficult. I need to do rituals or something. Like I said, I don't have the answers to these questions yet, but these are clues. Why is the Great Mother telling you that you're doing all this work, and yet she tells you that your attitude is false and artificial? And the other one I mentioned last night too was where the anima mocks me, and she mocks me with this this long distance relationship I was having with a woman that turned out she was a real live woman, and I was some kind of someone who was an unserious person. I didn't know it, but I was, and so as I'm leaving or trying to escape her mocking, and we're at the mother's brother's house. So we're at the end of a long lane in the forest, and she yells out after me, "Use pen and ink, Craig. Use pen and ink." In other words, anything other than reality, anything other than life magic, that's what you're using. So that's why you're so false and artificial. So what you're describing, Stuart, is hopefully that it see. So that was that. I love to be humbled and shocked by these things. I mean, the more humble you are, I think the more you learn, and this is exactly what I need, Stuart.
Well, I absolutely agree with everything you're saying, Craig. And also, I hear you describing your experience, which is yours. Not everybody that I would know would have any level of expertise coming into this. Like, they could be brand new to it. So how can I use this technique being brand new to it, and literally don't expect anything? Don't place anything into it and don't expect anything from it. Just play with it. Let's see what happens. You go into it willingly, with a light energy, and see what happens. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing how the psyche immediately flows into the willing space.
Oh,
incredible.
It loves attention.
It comes in with the symbols that you will relate with. They're specially made from you for you. You know, it couldn't be more personal than that. So to try to put somebody else's experience out there as the way, it's not, it's their way.
Yes.
And I'm absolutely not wishing to be in any way taken from what you're saying, Craig, on that. But there are different experiences, and some people will have an experience of one symbol, and that's what they need.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the sun danced. Amazing.
Yes. Well, I mean, that is the it is the aspect of the four functions. See, I think what my problem is I'm only using one, and what I was told once is that unless you encompass this with intuition and with feeling and with eros and with sensation, I mean, in other words, you approach it as a whole being who hasn't been all broken up and is so conceptual, but you approach it with this simple magic that Stuart's speaking of dance. Isn't dance a cathartic thing, or a way to approach it, or looking at the bark of 10 trees? I mean, these are the answers I'm looking for, Stuart, right now. You know, I mean, I think the real break for me was when I started doing the embodying of the other side and looking at myself. That was when it started to become the great challenge to me, you know. But anyway, this is what you're saying is very true. The idea, I mean, sometimes I think, one thing that he says too is that one of the real aspects of this is love, and he says that who are you loving? You're feeling all this love. What is it you're loving? Who are you loving? Who's loving who? You know, and what is it that you're loving? And he says you're moving into the experience of love itself, you know, and so it comes back. But what you're, Stuart, this is a wonderful approach to this as well. I mean, is a wonderful approach, and it's just such a fresh voice. I love it. But I wanted to tell you what the anima told me. She says, I see the anima, and she has the word amorosa on her sleeve. And the dream evolved into whatever amoroso is, you know, and in music, that means to be played in a loving and tender manner. And a melody can also be amoroso. So it's one who's smitten by love, much loved, and affectionate. And so the soul identifies herself as one whose being is love and tenderness, and one of great affection, smitten by love, searching for hooks in the outer world in which she can express this. The world of dream, the contents of the unconscious, similarly seek the being in which this affinity for uniting love, passionate love, rapturous love can be adequately expressed. But so I think that the things that are really important in this is, and I think this is something that we're really going to get from Robert Johnson too, because Robert Johnson was a introverted feeling type. So everything he did was centered on a felt experience of active imagination, not a bunch of concepts of easily explained meaning. I mean, or very subtle statements. it was more of what Stuart was describing as, I think, the ambience of the ritual. This ritual that you were doing, you mentioned it just has like a dream has an ambience. I think that the ritual, the magic, has an ambience. But Stuart, please, this point of view is a great counter to what I mean. It's a great balancing to some of how. See, Jeffery Raff was a student of Marie-Louise von Franz, so he's kind of speaking her language, and she was a introverted thinking type. So we need to hear from the feeling intuitive.
Stuart,
yes.
Stuart, where are you calling in from?
Oh, I'm in Ireland.
Ireland, okay. Yeah. I thought so. My wife is her mother was Irish, and so we have I was in Ireland in 2018 in the summer, and I just loved Ireland and got to meet a lot of her mother's family, and yeah, so it's terrific. And I love the Irish folklore, the Irish. I gather they preserved Christianity in when it was being, I guess, pretty much crushed. Christianity for me is rather a complex subject because I not to dwell too long, but when it comes to the Bible, I had written this down some time ago when I was more maybe Christocentric, but it says appropriate the word and transform your thinking. And indeed, I'm doing that. And insofar as I would counter perhaps the typical theologian's interpretation of the Bible. But anyway, in summary, the Irish are dear to my heart for all that they've done and continue to do, and the potential there.
The storytellers, the Celtic storytellers. I mean, it's this is what's so amazing about Ireland, I think, is
our pain. Yeah, our pain is very close to the surface.
Yes,
it's quite recent. It's within each generation, nearly within memory of each generation. Like so it hasn't gone away. So we're very broken as a culture, I suppose, in some ways, and also we're far enough away from the heart of Europe. We're only an extremity. We're the tip of the finger. Next door to the Atlantic. So we're sort of a bit wild as well, and it's an interesting mix, and we have tremendous creativity. Coming, both in all directions in terms of theology and music and writing and the whole thing,
and just the ability. I mean, one thing I've noticed about Irish history and Norwegian history is it's a train wreck. I mean, you read Irish history, I mean, with Cromwell and it's hell or Connacht, and
well, the mythology is brilliant.
Yes.
I'd say skip the history and go straight to the mythology.
Because and then there's Finn McCool and it's got the 5 provinces, but one is not a real province, and
But even before Finn McCool, go right back the ancient mythology, like the light and the dark and the battle on the shores, the ship, the invaders coming on ships of light. It's so full of wonderful.
Yeah, Morgan Le Fay, and I mean, it's just it is absolutely beautiful. And I read a book by a guy. There's two of them, and I can't remember what their names were, but it was this was in the early part of the 20th century. They had visited all of the storytellers, of Ireland who were still in existence, and you never told a story except after Samhain, that was the only time you could start telling stories, which was after Halloween or, after the harvest. And then you couldn't tell it in the summer, and then you could only tell it at night.
Craig, we call it Samhain.
Yeah, Samhain. Yeah.
Samhain.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it was spelled that way, But but then you can only tell it after night. And, you know, this wonderful thing of the thin places, you know, where heaven and earth are only 3 feet apart. I mean, it's just that this Celtic world, the finger of Europe that was on the fringes, was you know, had St. Patrick and his scribe Brendan come, you know, and it became Catholicized. But I think it really still possesses a lot of the pagan or the Celtic.
We have there's a lot of megalithic sites around Ireland. You know, ancient burial mounds and stone circles and fairy forts, we'd call them. And traditionally, these were the places where the land was thin, you know, where you entered into the other world. So even today, farmers won't plow them. They won't, you know, they're held with sort of a reverence that this is a sort of portal to the other dimension. And people don't understand, of course, you know, they're busy doing their own thing. But these stories are kept alive. Word of mouth, literally, they're handed down. So that sort of esoteric magic, that sort of esoteric connection is still fully alive, even within the people today. Because nobody lives far away from a farming background in Ireland. Okay, you've got cities and places like that. But even the people in the cities are coming from the land. You know, so you know, we're very close to the mother, the Irish mother, but the great mother, the whole cycle of nature and, you know, planting and plowing and all this, and it keeps us alive. The aliveness that flows from the psyche and from those darker places, deeper places, not bad, but the aliveness is very fresh. It's very aliveness.
And I feel a fullness, and I feel an impoverishment in my own heart, just listening to you speak. This treasure that you've been given of being born, of having the coming from the land of your ancestors, where in the United States, you know, we're rootless, you know, and I just feel an emptiness in my own heart, an impoverishment, listening to the richness and fullness of the Irish spirit. So
I totally agree, Stuart. That's so beautiful. And, you know, my ancestors have been in America for 400 years, and the closest I get to a real ethnic home is I'm 1/16 Scottish, I think, and so I have this kind of longing to connect with an ethnic part of the world. But as I hear you talk, Stuart, it makes me think about this one line that will always stick with me from Raising Ned Devine, you know, that film, where the priest says to a villager at some point, you have to realize that Christianity is but a thin veneer over these people. I just really love that. It feels like that's exactly what you're talking about.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, that removal, Craig, that you're mentioning in terms of the States and, you know, life as other people live it, it's very easy to come back to the roots by just being practical. So yeah, that's fine now. Tell me that again, and just work it from a very practical place in yourself. What do you need?
Well, this is a wonderful grounding too.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to present it as Jeffery Raff outlines it, but we're not going to take him for gospel. And he's trying to be practical. If you can add your practical experience as well as someone who does it too, I think we're going to really live it, you know, rather than just hear about it, you know. And I'm trying, you know, on my own to do it, and you know, it's been very enriching to me but I still got a lot of questions. I mean, and I know that there's a lot of things left out there hanging. So anyway, well, I think maybe we could start next time. But Stuart, anytime you can come, you are such a rich resource. I would love to have you come whenever you can. It's it's about 4 or 5 o'clock there, or
It's 5:40 now in the
oh,
afternoon.
5:40. Yeah. Okay.
So,
All right. Well, anyway, thank you.
I apologize for bursting in at the end. And
No, I've known you, Stuart, for quite a while, and I'm just so glad that I could hear you.
Yeah, having said that, Craig, I don't know the format. Do you know I'm bursting in at the end from my point of view.
Nobody cares.
And even to voice an opinion, for me, it's like, well, will I? So because I could be way off theme.
This is genuine input. I mean, this is absolutely, it's spoken from the heart. Is always a refreshing breath. So anyway, well, we'll reconvene next time. I'll try to get out the aspect that we have. If Stuart, if you could send me your email too, I could put you on the email list. It's up to you. But you just put it in the Facebook Messenger. But anyway, we'll just reconvene next Saturday at 10 a.m. and I guess that would be 4 a.m. Irish time. But
yeah, 4 p.m.
Blessings to you, Stuart. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any closing comments, Charles or Tim or Miles?
Yeah, Stuart, come back if you can. It's really helpful to hear your perspective. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Genuineness.
I do my best.
The voice of genuineness is makes my heart melt. Okay. Do you have anything, Charles?
No, not really. But yeah, thanks for coming, Stuart.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time then. Thank you so much, all of you. I'd love it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye now.